This is like my favorite subject to talk about. I am going to talk to you about corset patterns and swayback stuff, which I feel like I do corrections for in like really almost every corset I make. So I made a little like 3D model of one of my favorite antique Symington corsets. She's a real curvy lady. If you're working with an antique pattern and you need to find the waistline, this is a great way to do it. To just print out 2 copies and make sure one is mirrored and tape them together, and then you can draw where the waist is. So anyway, I have this wonderful curvy lady, and I had a question about if the belly is always protruding when you make corsets. So the first thing to check is you can bend the busk below the waist a little bit. Here's one that I just finished. You can see that it's straight up here, and then right here, like below the waist, I've bent it just a tad. And I feel like it just kind of cancels out the natural, like you're compressing the waist so it wants to kind of like go below and squish out a little bit, and this just helps bring everything back in. So this is a really like easy, mild solution fix. A little bit stronger is to do what this corset pattern does and have like essentially little darts right here and here, where the seam, instead of going straight down, like cups slightly on each piece, so you can build it into the patterning that it'll have this curve. And you can depending on if you're trying to make like a really flat stomach, you can make that section longer, or if you really want like the 1860s 70s like super pregnant belly, you can make the dart shorter, so like only the last half an inch or an inch or something is being brought back in on the lower edge. But if you do those 2 things and you are still getting like this intense kind of dishing, or like this part is really standing away from the waist, and especially if the front is also standing away from your body, then it's probably a swayback thing. And what's happening there is that the angle of the rib cage is not the same in the body that you're building for in your pattern. So I'm gonna cut this little thing in half at the waist and show you what I mean. So now we have a little corset pattern like this, and if you think of your body as having like these 2 separate sections of the rib cage and the hip and a flexible spine that connects the 2, you might want to change the tilt of your pattern like this, so that then the belly is against your belly and the bust is against your bust, because now the back is shorter and more angled out. I make this correction on most of the antique patterns that I use for modern bodies, and I will show you what it looks like in flat pattern. So the center back is over here and the center front is over here. You take a wedge out. I like to do an equal amount at center back so you don't have to worry about this straight line becoming like an angle. But you can do that too. You can make it an angle and re-straighten, whatever. But the important part is this wedge at the side, because this is where the magic happens. This, along with the shortening of the back, is what's changing the angle of the rib cage of the corset. From being tipped more forward to being tipped more back. I usually do this correction like right above the waist. I make the bottom of my wedge the waistline, and then I build the wedge above the waistline. Usually just doing it on the back is sufficient. I do about a 1/2 inch, usually somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 inch, depending on how much the corset pattern is standing away from the front. You can also see it if the back of the corset is like digging into the person's back at the same time. It makes this problem like really, really obvious. There have been 1 or 2 occasions where I have also done the opposite, where I've like added in a wedge to the front, like to tip it even more, but usually just like taking a bit out of the back is my favorite way to correct this problem. You could go the other way too, theoretically, if you really needed to, if you needed to make the front more curvy and to make the back longer. I haven't run into that yet, but you could. So that is something fun to consider when you're making your mock-ups. This pattern is a Symington 31300 in the like red stamped numbers on the images. I forget what the base ID number is, sorry about that. But this is a great pattern for larger bust sizes. I would say like triple D and above. It also has quite a generous belly. It needs to be flexible 100%. Like I made this corset probably 8 or 9 times, and the mock-ups would be great because I was making them out of like a single layer of coutil or canvas and putting bones in. And then I would make them out of like coutil with more bones and a layer of like satin or sateen, and it was too stiff and it wasn't like going with my body enough, and I was like, why isn't this working? So I think with these corsets that have a lot of boning in them, make it more flexible and it'll help shape it to the body more. But yeah, those are a couple of thoughts I have about swayback corrections and why the belly is going away from the body in most cases. This is usually the fix for it.